Imagine a man who holds the fate of millions in his hands. One signature, one command, one decision. Enough to ignite a catastrophe that history would never forget. This is not fiction. This is real. A powerful leader, shaped by ambition, paranoia, and a vision that knew no moral boundaries. His choices were calculated, cold, and decisive. But the consequences were human lives, measured in the millions. Today, we explore the story of that decision, how it came to be, what drove it, and why. To this day, it remains one of the deadliest choices a single person has ever made. He was born into a world of chaos. His childhood was marked by political instability, social unrest, and personal hardships, where others might have faltered. He learned to see opportunity in disorder. From an early age, he displayed a rare intelligence. He read constantly, absorbed the strategies of generals long dead, and watched as those around him stumbled in indecision. People began to notice him, not for warmth, not for kindness, but for ambition and a sharp, calculating mind. By his teenage years, he had already developed a reputation for ruthlessness. He understood power not as influence, but as absolute control. His peers were intimidated, and those who doubted him vanished from his path, socially, politically, or sometimes physically. This relentless drive led him to positions of increasing authority. Advisors, generals, and bureaucrats learned quickly that his decisions were final. And yet, he was never satisfied. Every victory made him thirst for more. Every conquest made him hunger for dominance. By the time he stood at the pinnacle of power, he had transformed from an ambitious young man into a figure who believed that history itself was just a shape, and anyone who opposed him was merely an obstacle in his grand design. The world he inherited was fragile. Nations were recovering from previous wars. Economies were collapsing, and alliances were more fragile than ever. Leaders everywhere were cautious, hesitant to make bold moves. But he thrived in chaos. Where others hesitated, he acted. Where others negotiated, he maneuvered and manipulated. He understood that the strongest weapon of a leader was not just armies or weapons, but timing, knowing when to strike, when to deceive, and when to use fear to maintain control. He watched as smaller conflicts escalated, as nations prepared for war, and as ordinary people struggled to survive. To him, the suffering of the masses was irrelevant. What mattered was a world he envisioned, a world ordered by his rules, governed by his authority, and secured by his power. His advisors warned him of potential backlash. Generals advised caution. Diplomats pleaded for restraint. But in his mind, hesitation was weakness. The moment to act was now, and nothing could stand in his way. The decision itself was almost clinical in its simplicity. It required meticulous planning, precise timing, and a cold detachment from human cost. Maps were unfurled. Military advisors presented logistics. Economists predicted consequences. But above all, he weighed power and control above morality. He asked one question repeatedly: what will this achieve? When the advisors presented estimates of civilian casualties, he paused, not with concern but with calculation. Millions of lives were projected to be lost. But in his mind, the price was acceptable. Victory demanded sacrifice. Progress demanded destruction. He envisioned the world after his command, nations trembling, rivals broken, his authority unchallenged. And he imagined himself immortalized, not as a man responsible for unimaginable suffering, but as the architect of a new order. Some historians compare this decision-making process to chess. Every move deliberate, every sacrifice strategic, every outcome calculated. Yet the stakes were real. Entire cities, entire populations were counted as pawns in his grand design. Even before the decision, the world was signaling danger. Small skirmishes escalated into full-scale conflicts. Cities teetered on famine. Epidemics spread, and refugees flooded borders. But instead of heeding these warnings, he used them to justify his choice. He argued that bold action now would prevent future chaos. Better to act decisively, he said in private meetings, than to watch weakness destroy the world around us. Internally, some advisors grew uneasy. They warned of backlash from other powers, of moral outrage, of economic collapse. Some pleaded for diplomacy, for restraint. Yet he ignored them. In his mind, restraint was failure. Hesitation was defeat. By the time he finalized his order, resistance within his circle had been silenced. Fear, loyalty, and manipulation ensured compliance. His decision was final. There would be no debate, no second-guessing, and no undoing it once set in motion. Once the command was issued, the gears of destruction moved swiftly. Troops mobilized, weapons were deployed, and the machinery of state, political, military, and industrial worked in unison. Entire cities were evacuated, burned, or bombed. Civilians became targets not because of any wrongdoing, but because their existence was inconvenient to his plan. The scale of destruction was unprecedented, and the world could do little to stop it. The psychological impact was immediate. Fear spread faster than armies. Populations fled, governments faltered, and global trade collapsed under the weight of uncertainty. Newspapers reported the devastation, but no one dared intervene directly. His power, after all, was absolute, and through it all, he remained calm, detached, in private. He reviewed reports of casualties as if they were financial statements, not human lives. For him, this was a necessary step toward achieving greatness, a grim calculus where numbers mattered more than empathy. The international reaction was a mix of horror and paralysis. Nations condemned his actions, yet few had the means to respond effectively. Military coalitions debated intervention, but logistics, fear, and political hesitation slowed their response. Meanwhile, the effects of his decision rippled outward. Refugee crises overwhelmed neighboring countries. Epidemics spread through overcrowded cities. Supply chains collapsed, and yet his authority remained unchallenged. Even allies began to question the morality of the operation, but the momentum was unstoppable. His network of spies, informants, and loyal generals ensured that dissent was quickly silenced. The world was watching, powerless, as the consequences of one man's decision reshaped history. The numbers are staggering. Millions perished. Entire generations were erased. Families torn apart. Cities reduced to ruins. But beyond statistics, the human cost was personal, visceral. Children starved. Mothers cried. Fathers fought desperately to protect what little remained of their families. Communities vanished overnight, and yet he remained unmoved. Some historians argue that the leader never fully grasped the human suffering caused by his choice. Others believe he understood perfectly and didn't care. In his logic, sacrifice was necessary, pain was temporary, control was eternal. What drove him to act with such ruthlessness? Some say ambition, others say paranoia. He feared weakness more than he feared criticism. He believed history would vindicate him. In private journals and letters, he often justified his decisions with cold rationalizations. He wrote of the burdens of leadership, of difficult choices of greater good, and of sacrifices required to shape the future. But the future he envisioned was not humane. It was orderly, structured, and dominated by his vision of control. The cost, millions of lives, was merely a footnote, a statistic in the ledger of his ambition. Even after the immediate devastation ended, the consequences lingered. Cities had to be rebuilt. Societies scarred by trauma. Generations grew up knowing only loss, fear, and uncertainty. His name became synonymous with destruction, a warning for leaders and nations alike. Textbooks debated his brilliance, but memorials mourned his victims. Statues were erected for victories, but monuments rose for the millions lost. The world remembered one decision above all, a choice that cost millions of lives, a choice that shaped geopolitics, and a choice that proved how dangerous unchecked power can be. What can we learn from his story? That ambition without morality is catastrophic. That power, when divorced from empathy, can destroy not just nations, but humanity itself. One person can indeed make a difference. One decision can create chaos. And history shows us that the cost of a single choice can ripple through generations. As you reflect on this story, remember, leadership is not just about vision. It is about responsibility. It is about understanding that decisions carry consequences far beyond the boardroom, far beyond strategy, and far beyond ambition. History does not forgive. History does not forget. And the echoes of one decision can last longer than any life, longer than any empire, and longer than any leader. So, the next time you hear about decisions made behind closed doors, about leaders shaping the world, Remember this story. A man, a choice, millions lost. It is a chilling reminder that power without conscience is not strength. It is devastation. One decision, millions of lives, and a lesson that history still whispers over and over. Never underestimate the weight of a single choice.